okay? Um, People are asking me what our take is on what's happening in Minnesota. Well, basically, if Joe Biden had done this the right way, and if things had been set up so that he could have done it the right way, what should have happened is that if they wanted to change immigration policy, they should have done so through the Congress. Congress should have amended, appealed, redone, rethought their immigration statutes. But they didn't. And so Biden just took a executive action to throw open the borders and let all these people in. But the executive power does not extend to overturning public law. So what we are left with is a whole bunch of people, an estimated up to 25 million people who are here who shouldn't be here, who are totally undocumented and living here and living on our economy and you know, who just entered the country illegally and unlawfully. So then you have ICE, which is enforcing the actual law. And when protesters get in the middle, then they're considered accomplices. And that's how people get hurt. So we should all be thinking in terms of no matter what your political leanings or your opinions about the immigration and nationality laws, the way to change laws is by the legislative process. It is not by executive action. And we all know that. So the problem becomes, I guess you could say, collateral damage, especially when well-intended members of the public get involved in these issues of trying to interfere with the ICE agents as they go about their business trying to catch and return and deport people who are here illegally. So just as I pointed out with the last terrible incident, there are ways that we can protect ourselves and protect our families. Number one is by staying home and avoiding the streets when things are crazy. There are other ways of protesting effectively than going out and standing in the streets and shouting. There are other ways of taking action other than going to an area where you know that these raids are taking place and interjecting yourself and trying to get in the middle of it. Because then you just make yourself an accomplice to a crime. You're basically aiding and abetting a fleeing felon who's fleeing justice. And the justice is our public law. So there's really no good place to stand with that except to push for legislative change if you want legislative change. So those are our thoughts on this. Keep your nose clean, stay safe, stay home, stay away from these altercations if at all possible, and instead focus on what you can do as a group and individually to bring about change that is lawful, legal, and agreed upon and is set up properly. Okay? We don't want people getting hurt. We certainly don't want innocent people getting killed over something that needs to be a legislative process. So, you're going to have problems over this issue. And realistically, the authority to solve those problems resides with the actual living Americans who have declared their status and who have gone on the record. It does not affect, it should not affect the federal personnel. So again, we have a responsibility as the assemblies to make our voices heard. And the place to make those voices heard, or the office to make those voices heard, is the office of the Secretary of State, the United States Secretary of State, and any state of state equivalents are the offices that are supposed to be handling these sorts of inter-office and interagency fights. Because right now, especially with the immigration issue, you have Mr. Trump, and his corporation has an obligation under the Constitution of the United States of America to secure our borders and to prevent this kind of thing from happening. And at the same time, you have the, I guess you would say, the municipal government officers who are trying to follow regionalism. And that's because their corporation agreed to a regional plan of government that created the North American Union. If you think back to George W. Bush's administration, you will remember that he signed a compact that created the entire North American region, and that region included Canada, the United States, and Mexico. So that there were supposed to be, according to this United States Incorporated agreement, there was supposed to be a regional government established a number of years ago. And we were all supposed to have open borders between Mexico, Canada, and the United States. That was supposedly agreed to as part of a trade pact and everything between the United States municipal governments, okay? Well, that could be an easy thing if you're just talking about administering the post office, all right? But when you try to carry that forward into a regional trade organization or a regional governance organization, you are looking at adding a whole new layer of government, not just to the Postal Service, but to the entire government, which is, it's setting up an oligarchy above all of the other already established institutions and organizations. And that has gotten to a point where it's too complex to manage as it is. So while it's fine with us if they want to have a regional quote unquote government within the Postal Service, it really doesn't affect us, should not affect us. It affects their administration. It affects their ability to move, back and forth with the mail. But when it comes to actually establishing a fully functional regional government, you're talking humongous amounts of money and additional bureaucracy. So those are the sorts of things that have to be hammered out. And the people on the street have to gain a greater understanding of what these issues are and how they came to be issues before we can rationally have a voice and take a position and actually do the sorts of things that are necessary to clean this mess up. Anyway, this comes from the U.S. Incorporated, the municipal government, if you will, and it comes from the North American Union Treaty that George W. Bush signed a number of years ago. That I'm just offering that as additional insight into how we wound up with this whole business of open borders and people being, immigrating through Mexico into the United States and all sorts of other things that really are just misadministration and malfeasance Anyway, that's what I can offer you this evening about that particular issue. And of course, it's not just Minneapolis. This is happening all over the country. It's happening in New York. It's happening in San Diego. It's happening in San Francisco. It's happening in Chicago. All over the country, we're having these big immigration and naturalization type deportation actions. It's a broad spectrum effort. They've been wandering around back and forth trying to figure out what kind of authority they have and what kind of enforcement organization they can bring to bear on it. So some places you're seeing NHS, some places you're seeing ICE, other places you're seeing and have at various times seen National Guard. You've seen actual military units deployed. So it's kind of a grab bag, and you can't, it's hard to know what you're dealing with in each individual case. But most of the time you're dealing with a consortium of these different agencies that are pulling staff and trying to bring about the deportation. And when you're talking about the deportation of 25 million people, you are talking about a respectable number, almost, well, what is it, 7% of the population. And it doesn't seem like a realistic goal to try to deport that large a percentage of the population, or at least not to do it in the way that it's being done at this point, which is almost like something out of last century. So what we can do to make it better would be to assist in getting the monetary and financial system straightened out so that people would have a better future in their own government, in their own country, and would be able to live a more peaceful life without all of these different, well, let's just call them for what they are, agendas. The craziness that surrounds the whole issue of the monetary and financial systems. First of all, let's be clear that there's a financial system and there's a monetary system. And those of you who have been listening know that the financial system is based on things like promissory notes, stocks, bonds, all sorts of commercial paper, right? But the monetary system is and has always been based on actual assets, physical assets, like the petrodollar was based on oil. We've used silver and gold and copper to create asset-backed currencies in the past. So you're all familiar with that. Well, the thing that is failing at the moment is the financial system. And it's failing because the same sorts of kind of crackpot, obviously fraudulent rules that were applied to the banking system generally after the Great Depression have been applied to the commodities markets. And so they've been practicing fractional reserve banking with the futures contracts that are being traded on the commodities markets. And what that means, as you can see from the example of the silver situation on the COMEX, is that they only had 11% of actual physical silver on hand, and 89% of it was just silver on paper that had never actually been possessed, received, cataloged, dealt with, and distributed. So they were trading in a speculative way on the COMEX with regard to silver, and they got caught because there was suddenly a greater demand for actual delivery of silver than they anticipated. They say they had 11% in the vault, right? And they got a call for 20% out of the blue. And of course, they couldn't meet that. They couldn't deliver 20% of what they had out in futures contracts because they had been using this fractional reserve practice as it relates to commodities. And so they got caught with their pants down and they haven't been able to catch up. Now, the really scary thing is when people realize that, hey, it wasn't just silver. It wasn't just a heist. It wasn't like someone who went in and stole all the silver that was on the shelves. They were doing this as part of a banking practice that has been allowed since the early 1900s, which in itself has no basis in reality and really it's a very dangerous and very crooked thing to do, which is fractional reserve banking. Basically, people were sold what they thought were physical assets, and come to find out they were basically swindled and received a pig in a poke. They received paper silver, silver on paper, in which the sellers basically shined them on, took their payment, and then promised them at some future date if they really wanted delivery on silver, they would deliver it at that point. And they called this unallocated silver. So it's just another swindle. And it could be applied to the gold market. It could be applied to any market. It could be orange juice or corn or anything that is sold on the commodities exchange could be exposed in exactly the same way because they've been handled in the exact same way. And so if it weren't a silver squeeze, as they say, it could be a pork belly squeeze. It could be a wheat squeeze. It could be a beef squeeze. It could be any kind of thing that is sold on the commodities exchange and that has futures contracts associated with it. Any of these could be punctured in the same way. Any of them could be broken in the same way because they're only keeping a relatively small percentage of the commodity that's being traded, actual, physical commodity that's being traded at any given time. So that's the bigger scandal and the bigger danger is people realizing that, oh, I've got a paper silver contract. Oh, I've got a paper broccoli contract. I've got a paper soybean contract. And that's not the same as having the real soybeans, right? So anyway, I want to warn you all about that and also prepare for big moves in the stock market, which has been grossly, grossly overvalued for a long time. It has been so overvalued that companies have been rebuying their own stocks to make it look like there's action and interest in their stocks. And really, that practice shouldn't be allowed either, but it is. And so a big company will go in and it will buy back its own stock and have to pay a premium price for any value that's been added in the interim since the stock was sold. So this is a kind of deceptive practice that makes people think that the public is really buying the stock when in fact it's the company rebuying stock shares and making it look like it's the happening place to be, and it's not. So we have a grossly manipulated and grossly overvalued stock market, and the thing that was keeping it all going were the so-called Magnificent Seven tech stocks. And those tech stocks were even more overvalued than any other of the areas that we can look at. So now they're going bust because people have realized that there has been no productivity added and no advantage added that compensates for the amount of money going into these tech stocks. I mean, there are a lot of great ideas and a lot of things that are promised on the horizon, and it's one of those deals where someday never comes, and the money has just been doled out and doled out and doled out and doled out. We had Grok 1, and then we had Grok 2, and then we had Grok 3, and then we had Grok 4. And there was a law of diminishing returns involved for each one of those subsequent steps. And investors are noticing that. They're noticing how much is going into the tech stocks and how little is coming out in terms of increased productivity or increased features or increased usability or applications. And as a result, now even the tech stocks are wavering and actually suffering some losses. Anyway, you can't support an entire stock exchange or entire stock market on just one sector. There has to be movement and growth in at least a few sectors before you can get the kind of healthy economy that you really need. And so we do have a perfect storm brewing in terms of currency values, in terms of the value of the precious metals. And I want everybody to understand that there's a direct correlation between silver going up and the money in your pocket being useful. Okay, so when silver goes up, the value of the currency goes down because they have to print more money and add it to the equation in order to balance things out. So every time that silver goes up, on one hand, everybody who has silver cheers and goes, yay, but that also means that everybody who is holding fiat dollars has lost that much. Okay, it's not that the value of silver is actually going up, it's that the currency in which you're valuing it is being hyperinflated. And to the extent that those conditions exist, and to the extent that there's more demand in the marketplace for the physical metal than there is metal, you're going to continue to see this phenomenon. So just a word to the wise, the celebration in one quarter may not be compensatory for the losses in the actual value of the currency. And anyway, so all of that's going on at the same time. We have had several big movements in terms of getting out in front of the looming disaster. And as we've explained on other occasions, the living people are owed a gigantic amount of prepaid credit that was never credited to them. And an awful lot of very criminal, legalistic things have been done, mostly by the members of the bar associations, to find ways to justify all this theft and graft and to legalize things that are patently illegal and unlawful. So those things, those cows are coming home. This has been a very tumultuous week. We've had a lot of different organizations trying to figure out what's going on, why is it the way it is, how are we going to change it and make it better. And it's very, very frustrating because we've had the answer for at least a decade. And it's a good answer. It doesn't hurt anyone and it solves the problem. But because it runs counter to the assumptions of the bankers and the treasury officials who are only used to one system and have a hard time seeing anything above or beyond that, we have this very arduous process of educating everybody and, one by one securing agreement that, oh, well, that is the way to go. And we, we're doing it, but it's very frustrating. It's very time consuming. And the people who we're working with come from a very varied background. And they come from all over the world. And we have both civilian and military organizations involved in this process. So not only do we have a lot of cultural differences, we have a lot of different assumptions or focus concerns for these different groups. As far as we're concerned, this is credit that is owed to us. There's no way that they can try to argue and say that no, it isn't owed to us. And we are not obligated, as they are, to exist in the realm of debt. Because you see, they are forced to function on our credit. So they're only interested in credit because that's all they have to spend. And they ignore everything else. They just keep single-mindedly focused on, oh, how can we expand credit? How can we expand credit? And they don't think in terms of, well, where's the credit coming from? And is that a legal and lawful source for credit? And, what kind of authorization is there anywhere for us to do this kind of thing? Those are all questions outside their bailiwick. Those are all questions that are supposed to be decided on a higher policy and management level than they have. So they're kind of stumbling around in the dark and doing what they think they can do, all without anyone's actual permission to do it. They've been functioning on unilateral contracts where they just kind of throw something out there, and if everybody accepts it or doesn't get up in arms about it, then they assume that that's been accepted and that they have a basis to go forward. Whether or not they do, and whether or not they have any actual vested authority or interest. So, lots and lots of different things that have come over the desk this past week that are of a diplomatic or educational nature. And as I say, we're just striving desperately to get out in front of the onrushing train wreck so that people have what they need. It just flashed they had lost the network.
We are back on and going.
Okay, good.
Let me double check with them.
So let's open it up and see if there are a couple more questions for people. Is there anything?
Yeah, give me a second, pull them up. There's a lot more questions. Put this mildly, there's a lot of questions.
We're already at
We are
5:32.
good. You said some time ago the AFD will be released on the day of opening at the exchange rate established on that day, implying a fixed exchange rate. The AFD to gold exchange rate is already fixed at 1/10 ounce per AFD. So assume you were talking about the exchange rate between AFD and world currencies. Is this correct?
That is correct.
Okay. In the past, you mentioned that we would have to get used to purchasing power of our accounts varying, since the AFD was gold backed and would vary with the gold price, and whatever fiat currency it would be converted into for payments. In other words, a variable exchange rate. So which one is it?
Well, you're trading against different currencies. I mean, obviously, euros have a different value with respect to the US dollar, and the US dollar has different exchange rate value against the ruble, and this goes up and down basically every day. So, yeah, so that's what I'm talking about, is that the value changes, and the value, the exchange value between currencies changes. That's what they're talking about when they're saying that the dollar gained 0.4% against the British pound, or they lost 1% against the French franc. Okay, they're talking about that daily fluctuation, not only in the currency, but also in the underlying precious metals, if you're talking about precious metals currencies. Of course, sometimes we're not talking about precious metals, we're talking about commercial paper. Okay, so you've got both the financial system and the monetary system, and in order to be able to exchange value between the two, and within each of those markets, you've got different exchange rates that change constantly.
Yeah, you ready for the next question?
I'm ready.
What military is going to keep us from being insurrectionists and backing up your proclamations during a restoration?
Well, there are, of course, as I've explained ad infinitum, there's two militaries. There's the DoD that we normally think of when we think of the Pentagon, and there's the Department of Defense that we normally think of when we think of Pete Hegseth. And they're not necessarily always in alignment because they serve different contracts and different capacities, and they are essentially protecting two different governments that have their own particular jurisdiction and their own law and their own agendas. So it does get to be very confusing. The one that is under contract, absolutely, to defend us, defend our borders, etc., the things that we all normally think of, is the U.S. Army. And they are under obligation to protect us. Now, other things go back and forth between the two corporations in terms of their agency personnel and the duty assignments of the agency personnel. All that is in like a different realm, a different room. And we wind up getting support sometimes, and other times we don't. This is the essence of a civil war where you have bureaucrats lined up against each other. That's actually what a civil war is, even though it's not a war, and even though it can't really be declared by the parties fighting it. We have objected strenuously to any civil war on our shores. It is not even rational in our view that our employees should be fighting and destroying our property and being at odds with each other. The way that they are kept at odds with each other is by manipulation. Both of these corporations, the United States and the United States of America Incorporated, are essentially fundamentally owned by the same parties. The same parties, which is the Committee of 300, which are the heirs of the British East India Company, have a 40% interest in the United States of America Incorporated, and I'm not sure what their ownership interest is in the United States Incorporated. But at the end of the day, the majority shareholder interest in both belongs to the Pope. So what you've got is a situation where two big corporations are being pitted against each other in ways that allow them to make money at our expense. And, so I gave an example this week in one of the articles using the immigration crisis as an example. On one hand, when you import people like that, the importing corporation makes a whole bunch of money, because when people from poor third world disadvantaged countries walk over the border and become identified as US citizens, they've suddenly increased in value as chattel by hundreds, if not thousands of times. And so there's a big increase in value in the chattel valuation that they're borrowing against. And that's why they have a motivation which is totally hidden from the public, both from those who are immigrating and from those who are having all these people immigrate into the country. There's a motivation, a financial motivation on the part of, in this case, the United States Incorporated, to bring all these people in, quite above and beyond the value of trying to, skew the vote toward progressive sorts of legislation and progressive politicians. So that the United States had it had a motive to bring all these people into the country. And at the same time, over here in the other column, you have the United States of America Incorporated, and their job contract says, "Thou shalt keep the border defended." Okay, so you've got this other corporation, which is majority ownership, owned by the same people, but it has a different contract, it has a different obligation. And so then they go and they arrest all these people who have been imported, right? And they charge us for deporting them. And the people who own both of these corporations make out like bandits, both coming and going. Because they own the United States Incorporated, they make up the spread difference between the starting value of the human chattel and the end value of the human chattel while they're here. So they're collecting and getting all sorts of extra credit on one hand, and then you have them standing as majority shareholders in the United States of America Incorporated, coming in and deporting all these people and charging us for the expense of deporting them. You see, they're making money both coming and going. And both of these corporations are ultimately majority share owned anyway by the Committee of 300, and they're all acting under the Pope. So it's a show. It's a movie. It's a fraud scheme. It's a good cop, bad cop scenario. It's a very self-interested commercial greed operation where they're creating a problem and profiting from that, and then they're solving the problem and profiting from that. And because it's being done by two different corporations, one a commercial corporation and one a municipal corporation, it looks like they're two different corporations fighting each other. It looks to the people as if there's, as if the United States Corporation is the Democrats and the progressives and the socialists, right? And it looks like the United States of America Incorporated over here is, the traditional patriotic, protecting the borders, that they're all clean and lily white and doing the right thing and upholding their contract, and that they're the conservative and the patriot movement and the Republicans and blah 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 on this side, the conservatives, right? That's not what's happening. what's happening is that very cynical and very greedy and very immoral people are manipulating both of these corporations and have ownership interests in both of these corporations. And they're using them synergistically to be able to charge more money and get access to more credit by manipulating them. You see, it's a good cop, bad cop. One is the bad cop that's causing the problem, and one is the good cop that's solving the problem. But whether they're solving the problem or causing the problem, they're aiming to make money on us either way. Okay, we're the odd men out. We're the victims here. We're that little kid, you know. Ever seen a couple of really nasty teenagers? They'll get a frisbee or a ball or something, and they'll have a younger sibling or cousin or something, a little 2 or 3-year-old who wants to play so badly, and they just keep throwing it over his head, and he keeps grabbing for that and grabbing for that, but of course he's too short. He can't really play the game. Well, that's what they're doing to us because we don't realize who they are. We don't realize how they're structured. We don't realize that it's our money and our assets that are being plundered and pillaged, and that these people are wildly outside their contract. Okay? We don't even realize that it's a contract for the most part. How many Americans realize that the constitutions are service contracts? It's not taught in our schools anymore. So we have people who are crippled in their understanding of what's going on and how they're being used and who's using them to what ends. And it's just a very nasty business of stage show and pretending to be one thing and actually being another, so that everyone is running around confused and mistaking what's actually happening. It's not any big deal between the progressives versus the conservatives. It's not anything between the Democrats and the Republicans. You've got somebody sitting up here at the very top who's manipulating both for profit. And they're profiting from us because we're too stupid to get in the game and figure out what's going on and call them on it. Well, that whole period of time is coming to an end because enough people are now educated, enough people are now, picking up on what's happening. And as more and more people do this, as more and more people realize that it is literally a show, like Q's always saying, oh yeah, sit back and enjoy the show. Oh, it's going to be just like a movie. It's not just like a movie, it is a movie, right? Okay. And to the extent that you can draw them out of that fictitious world and, kind of, hey, look at what's really going on here, then we all benefit because that keeps them honest. That makes them more aware of the fact that they're being examined, they're being judged, they're being evaluated on performance, their contracts are being enforced. Suddenly they can't do all of the crazy nonsensical things that they get away with otherwise because there's so much public attention being focused on them, and the public is educated enough to know what they're seeing. So just be aware that we're being played and how we're being played and by whom we're being played. Oh, Shannon.
Yeah, we ready for the next one?
Yes.
So you left that one kind of open-ended the way you were talking. If everyone gets all their money back, how is inflation controlled? When everyone is rich, no one is rich.
But you see, you're not going to be paid back in the same currency. So there won't be any inflation of the Federal Reserve note doing what we're doing. In fact, the Federal Reserve note, what's left of it, will gain value. Because, of course, we'll be taking it out of circulation. So there will be fewer and fewer Federal Reserve notes, and the debt that it represents will be smaller and smaller. So no, inflation, we don't have that problem with inflation.
Okay. If the IRS is on its way out, why am I still receiving notices to file taxes despite my opting out and despite my response to previous notices?
Because we have to kick them harder. Because more people have to become aware of the fact that they are exempt. And the IRS has to have its nose bashed hard enough so that it sits back on its haunches and goes, okay, because they really don't have any right to address anybody but their own employees. They've been counting all of us as voluntary dependents, and you've heard it before. Oh, they're all volunteers. They're all voluntarily self-taxing. Yeah, well, you know how voluntary it is in actual fact, and you also have cause to know that what they're doing is and I just call it to them. If the Brits and the popes want to indulge in an illegal payroll kickback tax addressed to their own employees, they can at least address it just to their employees. You see what I mean? They've been trying to pretend that we're all their dependents and we're all their citizens, and they've been taxing all of us and seizing upon our names and doing all sorts of nasty illegal crap because they've been able to get away with it. And the more of us who become fully informed, and the more of us who claim our exemptions, and the more of us who point out to the international community that, hey, they tried to legalize all this using the mutual offset credit exchange exemption, and yet the U.S. Secretary of State never actually set up a program, never actually made it accessible. So a remedy denied or made inaccessible isn't a remedy at all, which renders everything that they've done illegal, immoral, and unlawful. So we all have to get out there and, be aware ourselves and keep bringing this forward. We don't have to be constituents to contact the members of their Congress and say, hey, I'm owed an exemption and they're bothering me. And the more of us who do that, then the more common the knowledge becomes and the better the enforcement becomes. Because if you've got a whole nation of sheep who are not claiming their exemption, then they just get away with whatever.
Okay, ready for the next one. Anna's IPN January 22nd genocide of the Giants. Had some videos attached about the insane asylums, etc. That's where they put people who remembered. Trump just announced, okay, that's when you'll have to answer offline. Sorry, boss.
Oh, there's an even better one. Look up sleeping sickness. During the First World War, millions of people came down with this mysterious illness. Nobody could figure out how or what it was. They would just go to sleep, but it wasn't a natural sleep. They would eat if someone would actually take the time and remember to feed them. But they were in such a dissociated, groggy state that they couldn't function. And this sleeping sickness killed millions and debilitated and maimed millions more, and we don't hear about it. But the object was to zombify them, to leave them without their minds and their abilities to function.
Okay, ready? In the past, you've mentioned that we would be able to access the funds in our accounts only after a crash had taken place, and some sort of final valuation was done. Can you explain what this final valuation is about? As I understand it, the AFD valuation is already fixed at 1/10 an ounce of gold. Thanks.
The there's always been a lot of confusion about, what is an AFD, what is not an AFD, blah 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 blah. I don't know why, because it's fully stated in the actual currency definitions. But the point is, there is a time in place where the vault will be sealed and that deal will be done. Okay? And at that point, nobody will be able to put more money in, and it will be all outgo. It will all be translation into AFD.
Okay, next question. Since most bills require an account number, the length of a credit card number, do you know if our prepaid credit will include an account number that we can use to pay bills in addition to the QR code?
It'll all be under one card, and this card will basically it will function like a mini computer. And it will just automatically, when the charge comes out, the vendor will decide how they want to be paid. And so you'll wind up with vendors choosing AFD, or they will, if they're public vendors, they'll have to accept the heritage dollars. But we did find ways of building I call it a traffic circle, where different inputs can come in to the feed and take different exits. And so it makes it a lot easier for you as the end user, that you don't have to make those kinds of decisions and stipulations. All you have to do is keep track of the daily changes and how much you spent out of your account.
Okay, next one. If a new ASN has completed the 1779 with 2 witness statements, PIC ID, along with birth certificate, proof of domicile, can an ASN order a credential card through Paul on Washington? Or do you have to have completed the 928s to get a credential card? If yes, 1779 with supporting docs is only needed to order a credential card. How does the Federation let Paul know this info?
Well, we've let Paul know this info until we're blue in the face, and for some reason, he just doesn't want to believe it. We have no requirement that anybody ever do the 928s again. Okay, there it is, boom. We created the whole business of the 1779 declaration with the 2 witness statements so that most people could just, at a minimum, do that and be done, and have access and be able to vote in the land and soil jurisdiction and do all the other things that they need to do. The 928s are a relic from when we were having to slog through and do a whole lot of things all at once for all of our coordinators who were under attack, okay? And today what we recommend is that you look at the 928s, and if there's something there that you need, most typically a baby deed or a baby record, go ahead and do that too, okay? I mean, if you're an ASN and you've got 10 kids, yeah, you should definitely take a look at the baby records so that you can claim your kids, okay? But not everybody has kids, so it's unfair to make everybody fill out the form for 0 children, right? Okay, so look at the 928, see if there's anything there that applies to you. If it doesn't, it doesn't. If it does, it does.
Okay, next question. What is the status of American military returning to American control?
Well, they're no longer mercenaries, and they are owed funding direct funding, not not money that they go out and earn on their own, okay, by being mercenaries, no. But they're owed direct public funding if they're a true national military.
Okay, next question. Tony Carroll on Ireland has started a podcast on YouTube. I know you've done several webinars with him, and he holds a great deal of knowledge. He's giving banking updates, and I'm wondering if they're accurate. I always say if I don't hear straight from on ourselves, I have doubts. He put out a timeline for March for the banks to go live, and I'm wondering if his information holds merit. Can you please confirm or deny? Thank you for your continued efforts.
I'm not aware of any specific time that has been discussed for a general, when the changeover will be complete. Okay, I don't think anybody knows that for sure. There may be estimates. Basically, we're the only ones that have money. We're the only ones that should have money. And that means both the physical assets, the gold and silver and land and all that stuff belongs to living people. It does not belong to corporations. And so since the living people are the only ones that have those assets and to whom they belong, when the living people claim those assets, the corporations are dependent on the credit that we actually allocate to them or that we provide to them in a form from which they can derive credit, okay? So what happens is that all of these banks that you see, all of them, Wells Fargo, Citibank, Bank of America, all of those are bankrupt. They owe us far, 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 far too much to operate. They're all insolvent. And they've been insolvent for years. They should have been shut down. So now what happens? Well, they get taken over, and they get placed under new management. But what they're fighting right now is that they don't want to be in a different jurisdiction. They want to continue on as a funded British maritime bank while Americans are the owners. And they want to operate freely in this country, which is, again, not something that makes any sense. If we have maritime banks here in this country, they should be operating under American maritime law. They should not be operating under British maritime law. Okay? But they don't want to give that up because the British maritime law gives them a lot more perks and a lot more coercive power. However, our answer to them has been that, hey, you're bankrupted. We're the creditors. We're taking over your assets, and be grateful that we're paying your bills in bankruptcy and not going after you and not making this personal. The other thing is that they want to retain control to a greater degree than is reasonable. If you're just totally insolvent, not a prayer of ever being able to earn back the money you already owe. This is a Chapter 7 involuntary bankruptcy situation. And this is exactly the situation all these banks and all these securities and brokerage houses are in because of what they've done and the way they've done things. So it's beggars can't be choosers. They can't treat it like an acquisition merger where they have something of value and somebody's coming in and buying it from them because they have nothing of value. They are under they're under the red line. They don't even have one nostril above the surface. So they're but they're fighting. They want to keep their existing system. They just want to deal with a bunch of new people coming in, and they think that that is sufficient, and it's really not. And one of the other reasons it's not sufficient is the inflation problem we discussed earlier. For them, if there's a direct correlation between their situation here with silver and inflation, well, it's the same way across the board. The only way they can solve anything, the only way they can pay back all those people that were invested unknowingly in paper silver is by giving them more paper. And so what happens? They gin up the paper mills, and they hand them more Federal Reserve notes, and they increase their indebtedness when they're already insolvent. Everybody see where this is going, and how adding all that extra paper just decreases and devalues and inflates and hyperinflates the Federal Reserve note more, right? But we're not dealing in Federal Reserve notes. We're dealing in American Heritage dollars, which are already prepaid credits. So they already have value. They already have asset value issued as credit. Okay, so when we add our currency to the market, what happens? Oh, well, we go in and we snatch all those Federal Reserve notes out of circulation. Well, what happens is that then the currency starts to deflate instead of hyperinflate. We can do that. They can't. You see, all they control is the Federal Reserve note. We control the credit side, the American Heritage dollar. So we can add the American Heritage dollars back into the system, and it has the effect of deflation and actually helps the Federal Reserve note regain its valuation. You see, it's a win-win situation. It's a win-win for the people who actually are the owners of all of this, and it's a win for the Federal Reserve note, which then can recoup and reclaim its position and be of some value as a note within the entire financial system. And I don't know why people don't think about this, but they don't. I have no idea. At least the Treasury people and the people that are engaged in these occupations, the bankers and the securities brokerages, all those people should be thinking about this. Okay. We have to wrap up here because the snow is supposed to start almost blizzard conditions. Think about money and think about different kinds of money. Think of how a prepaid credit will cancel out a debt note. Think about how canceling out the debt notes will reduce the supply of debt notes, right? Think about how our vast, vast, vast prepaid credit can be used to erase any national debt. Okay? And thanks for being here, and thanks for paying attention and keeping up to date and doing what you can. I think one of the things that I heard this week that was really inspiring was how community increases your chances of survival. The more people you know, the better reputation that you have, the more good relationships that you can form, the better. And this is exactly what our assemblies are here to serve as a nucleus, an organizational platform for people to get to know each other, to recognize other Americans who are aware, who are educated, who are, actually active, and use your militias to help each other. If we have members in Minneapolis who are afraid of the mobs and things, and what can we do to help each other? These are things that we have to address on a local level, and your assemblies are there at both the state-wide level, and hopefully as more and more counties get assembled at the county level too, to be able to do things like emergency fuel and food banks, be able to do things like help with people's car wrecks and all the other things that go on. I mean, help each other, be there for each other, take it to heart. The thing that we can do for each other that is going to assure everyone's survival to a much greater extent is by functioning as a community. And even if that community is scattered all over the state or all over the United States, which in fact it is, we can help each other. We can care about each other. We can get to know each other. And by doing so, we can form a much greater, stronger, I won't say hedge, but this is the value of community, and we can give that to each other by properly caring for our assemblies and participating in them in the spirit that was intended by our founding fathers. Benjamin Franklin famously said, "If we don't hang together, we will most assuredly hang separately," right? So we need to form those good, solid relationships. We need to respect each other. We need to trust each other. And we need to act upon our community involvement as brothers and sisters, as Americans, as members of our states, as North Carolinians and Vermonters and New Yorkers and Wisconsinites and Minnesotans, and all of us need to get that kind of team spirit going for our state, our family, for our fellow Americans that they're always talking to, but never really knowing what they're saying. The way things stand, there are so many people here who are being treated as British subjects and counted as British subjects and don't even know it. And there are just as many people who are being counted as municipal citizens of the United States and don't even know it. So we need to form up and realize that we are part of the true America. We're the ones that are holding the door open for everybody else. We're the ones that are keeping the fires burning. All right, guys. God bless and keep you this week. Be healthy, be happy, and spend some time just letting your mind wander in happy thoughts. Go to your happy places. Don't let your total attention be consumed by all this craziness, because a lot of it is just craziness. And you need to keep centered. You need to, keep your even keel and keep focused on the things that you want and the things that matter to you, taking care of yourselves, your families, your communities, and doing whatever you can to make it a better world, right? All right, guys. I'm going to have to say goodnight, so hopefully we'll get home before the blizzard hits. Good night.